and all the participants on the behalf of Center for Sustainable Habitat, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, and Kumar Surjit Singh Institute of Spatial Planning and Environment Research, Panchkula. World Habitat Day was first celebrated in 1986 in Kenya with the theme Shelter is My Right. Continuing its legacy, each year the United Nations comes up with a pertinent and an apt theme. This year's theme is Mind the Gap, Leave No One and No Place Behind, which is aimed to put a spotlight on widening inequalities in living conditions across the world. A cascade of challenges from climate chaos and conflicts to COVID 19 is acutely hitting the vulnerable populations. The pandemic and recent conflicts have reversed years of progress and resulted in two critical categories: those who would have exited poverty in the absence of pandemic. Secondly, those who have fallen into poverty on account of the pandemic. According to UN Habitat's World Cities report, the number of people affected was between 119 to 124 million in 2020 and between 143 to 163 million in 2021. Thus, tackling urban poverty and inequality have become an urgent global priority. Today, we have four distinguished speakers with us, namely Professor Shashwat Bandyopadhyay, Professor SEP University Ahmedabad, Shri Shailendra Kaushik, co-founder Cities Forum, Shri Rajneesh Sareen, Program Director, Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi, Dr. Shabnamjeet Hundal, Senior Lecturer, Jammu University of Applied Science, Finland. So without taking much time, I would like to invite our source of inspiration, Professor Ashwini Luthra, Coordinator, Center for Sustainable Habitat, to deliver the welcome address. Luthra, sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. This is a very auspicious day when different organizations are celebrating World Habitat Day. And as spatial planners, habitat is our agenda in our teaching and research. And it is in this light that every year Center for Sustainable Habitat organizes events on the occasion of World Habitat Day. And this particular World Habitat Day has a very specific theme and very provoking theme, that is mind the gap without leaving anyone and any place behind. Now, this is a theme that is very open ended because any discipline can deliberate on this, and really habitat being a multidisciplinary kind of area, and I think the deliberations which are interdisciplinary in nature would bring fruits to uh, what is the need of the day or what is the need of future as well. In this light, while inviting the distinguished speakers, a thought was given uh, who should be our speakers of the day. And none other than Dr. Shashwat Bandyopadhyay, Professor SEPT University, who is in the planning discipline. And he has traveled across the regions of the globe, and he has novel ideas on how those gaps can be filled. And it is where resilience comes at the core. And while requesting him to be a distinguished speaker, I requested that kindly speak on the resilience part, because resilience not only from physical ethos but from social ethos also is required at the habitat level. Thank you, Dr. Saswat, for accepting my request, and I am sure that all of us will be enlightened with new thoughts and ideas about resilience, what kind of policies and what kind of policy gaps are there at the resilience level itself. Thank you, Dr. Bandyopadhyay. I thank Mr. Rajneesh Sareen, who is our knowledge partner also. He is program Director of Habitat Division of Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. And we have listened to him number of times, particularly me. And every time I listen to him, I get something new. And on this occasion of World Habitat Day, I guess being an environmentalist, he is going to speak on the climate agenda because he is the person behind pushing the cooling action plan, which is adopted in the country. So he has done a lot on climate and cooling action plan, and at the same time, different aspects of habitat. Most recently, he is engaging himself in affordable housing, housing types, the traditional housing, how can you save or conserve, and very recent is the C&D waste management, which is a very core issue at the habitat level these days. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajneesh Sareen, for accepting the invitation. I am awfully thankful to Mr. Shailendra Kaushik, who is also our knowledge partner. He is the co-founder of Cities Forum London. And in fact, he was traveling across the region since last few days. And very recently, he has came back to his home, and probably my invitation was there, requesting him to be part of this event because Mr. Shailendra is a key person behind the policy formation at the national level. Along with GIZ, Mr. Kaushik's forum, they are suggesting the government that these kinds of policies, programs should be adopted for the sustainable habitat of the national and international arena, at the national and international arena. And in particular, because he is a transport planner, and I requested him to focus on the transport part, not limiting to transport part only. He is having the wisdom to relate the transport and other aspects together, and he is a master in all these things. And from the core of my heart, I thank Mr. Shailendra Kaushik on this occasion. I thank Dr. Shabnam Hundal, who is a senior lecturer at Yamk University of Applied Sciences, Jyväskylä, Finland. He is at the moment traveling, and by the time we will be reaching towards the end of this webinar, he will join us because he is heading towards Helsinki airport, and earlier he said the time is very short. Short means he'll be traveling. But looking at that, it is a concern with the Indian economy because he is an expert in the finance sector. And once we are talking about minding the gap, probably the major gap is in the infrastructure sector. And within the infrastructure financing is the major issue. And I requested him that if he can throw some light on the infrastructure investment part and suggest a good model for India comparing Europe at the same time. So I welcome Dr. Shabnam Ji Singh Hundal on this occasion. And I would fail in my duty if I don't welcome my co-partner of this webinar, Mr. Jaswant Singh Ji. He is Secretary General, Kanwar Surjit Singh Institute of Spatial Planning and Environmental Research. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us and guiding us on the occasion of organizing this event on the topic Mind the Gap. Thank you very much, Jaswant Singh, sir. He is my super duper senior, and I get a lot of guidance and inspiration from him. And I thank all the participants of this webinar at the same time, because without the participants, without the interaction of the participants with the speakers, probably the new ideas and innovations don't emerge. With these words, I thank everybody present for this webinar, and I hand over the stage to Dr. Ravi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Luthra, for setting the stage for today's discussion. Now we carry forward our event by introducing the first resource person of the day, Professor Shashwat Bandyopadhyay. Sir has over 28 years of rich experience in the urban development sector in South Asia with a focus on climate resilient and sustainable urban development, nature-based solutions, inclusive, green, and affordable built environment in the cities. Sir has done his PhD in climate resilience and has extensively done research and consultancy projects in tourism, heritage, regional planning, and environment sector, etc. Internationally, Sir has worked in Bangladesh, China, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Indonesia, and Philippines, etc. Now, I warmly welcome Professor Shashwat to share his knowledge with the participants. Sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Ravi. And I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Perfectly fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ashwin Luthra. Dr. Luthra is a very good friend of mine, and we have been collaborating for a long time. And I'm also very happy to see Mr. Jaswant Singh and also the members from KSS ISPAR, because Kumar Surjit Singh ji was one of our, very enlightened experts who have been guiding all of us. So I am very glad to see, and also all participant and fellow speaker. What I'll do is that I'll quickly share my screen and share some of our thoughts in this very August kind of theme, Mind the Gap, and leaving no one and no place behind, the World Habitat Days theme. So just let me share my screen, and then probably you'll Dr. Ravi, if you just can see whether the screen is seen now.
Yeah, it is visible now, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So you know that in this year also very important for all of us, because as we are celebrating 75th year of our independence, and this year also have brought together a lot of data, statistics, assessment, that what has been our urbanization trajectory in past 75 years, and where are we heading, and what are the kind of likely outcomes. So I must thank Dr. Ravi, Dr. Luthra, all colleagues from GNDU and others for organizing this very contemporary theme, Mind the Gap, Leave No One and Place Behind. Just as you know, this year, this event theme is triggered by this massive disruption of life and living across the global region by the onset of COVID-19. Although we are calling it 19, but actual impact we saw in India from 2020 to 2021. And it has majorly disrupted life, livelihood, living the way we have lived. Most importantly, our towns and cities have been the major sites of whether COVID breakout and COVID action. Because much of the COVID cases and impacts were witnessed in around 80% of COVID cases in India, or COVID districts in India. This is majorly an urban. And COVID has done two things very important. One is the importance of urban local body, because 94 onwards, 92 onwards, we have been talking about 74th Amendment, decentralization. For the first time, citizens and cities have realized the important role of an urban local body, because as you have seen, whether it is Ahmedabad, Amritsar, any city, the urban local body played a very, very important role in managing COVID. I mean, today, I think this a few days ago, World Health Organization was actually praising India that the way it has managed, way it has managed COVID, as well as delivered the the doses, boosters, and so vaccine and other thing. So that first thing what COVID has done, that it has brought back this the significance of urban local body, and the second, the issues of resilience. Today we are discussing this aspect, and Dr. Luthra told me also to highlight about the resilience, that the how one does bounce back, how a society, community, city bounces back when it is under stress. You see, I mean, many of us must be reading in newspaper and other. Still, many cities and states in the provinces in China, they're still struggling to bounce back because of a very strict COVID regime, very limited, and people are suffering from access to food, vegetables, and that aspect. But if you see Indian cities, and I mean, this 7 days we are witnessing in Ahmedabad, this Navratri festival is going on, and you can see the city vibrancy is back. People have, all the work, houses, even the economy is back. So the idea of resilience is back to this, and now there is a greater focus on public health, housing, mainly the housing for affordable in nature, infrastructure services, as Dr. Luthra clearly mentioned, because if you want to really leave no one behind and place behind, infrastructure is the great connector, and of course green and parks and spaces. COVID also has given rise to a discipline which has long been languishing in urban planning school, is called risk informed urban planning. So, this is the time, so that we also to reorient ourselves to see where are these gaps in, filling up our resilience effort, where are those gaps in terms of whether we are talking about, public health, housing, infrastructure, so that every corner, every citizen or every place in our society is connected to this. And that's what, this is a new urban development paradigm which has been triggered by COVID-19, where we are looking at, the small neighborhood, because COVID has seriously, when there was a prolonged lockdown, our large city, become almost 10-15 minute city. We're cycling to get our day-to-day groceries. Then we looked at critical infrastructure and logistics, because to how we supply oxygen, how we supply day-to-day milk, medicine, vaccine, and so on. How we access to core services for our survival. And it has also given an effort to that how we can make affordable housing. Because, in a non-COVID time or pre-COVID time, people have adjusted themselves in housing which is shared, housing which is, now COVID has given this kind of element that there is a need for affordable housing, for certain amount of people who are, migrant, then affordable rental housing and those related spaces. There are also a lot of, emphasis and, access to green, blue spaces. And I will not explain it, because you can see that there is a greater realization among the citizens, among the residents, that we need very close access to, parks and garden, open spaces, if you are caged in your homes for long. And WHO now has revised this guideline on blue and green infrastructure. I hope many of you, those of your planners, have seen that recent revision in their guideline, that access to green and open spaces is within 300 meters of your residential place of residence. So some of these changes are happening in around us, but there is always a new elephant in the room, is that we have been always, this is a German work study, and then every year they publish the climate risk index. I'm showing it 2019 data, but you can get 2021 kind of updation, that we are at the forefront of not only the COVID related risk, but we are also climate and disaster related risk. And if you see that, global level of atmospheric carbon dioxide changes, that has happened in this century only, because as you all know, the rise in carbon dioxide is measured in the industrial area level of 1850. So in 2022, this level has already, atmospheric carbon has already, concentration has already reached 410 plus. And that has triggered, and this is a very interesting graph a colleague sent me the other day, that rising of atmospheric carbon on the left column and the temperature and the air, and also the sum of this effort at the global level in terms of climate, environment, climate protocol. And as you from the curve, as you've seen, in 2021, we have already, our temperature has already risen by 1.21 degree. And the slope of this curve says that all this COP, all these discussions that are taken place has have very limited impact on ground. And limited impact, like people have committed, have not followed it up with action, and so on and so forth. And as a result, today we are discussing that whether we could control our temperature within 1.5 degrees, -2 degrees, or we may be compelled to 3 degree and above at the end of this century. And as many IPCC studies has clearly indicated, that we are actually we are already in a kind of a code red kind of a situation. With already 1.2 degree warming, we are seeing some catastrophic rainfall, changes in the weather, and other things. Particularly for Indian cities, that this is a great kind of, we are at the forefront. The cities are a dual role. One is that they are the site for GHG emission. Also, they are the site for adaptation. And India cities have maximum number of poor. If you take up any city statistics, and then you'll see about, at any point of time, 30-40% of our cities have the urban contribution of urban poor will be about 30. Share of urban poor would be about 30 to 40%. There could be some outlier here and there. Now the challenge here is that these poor, the contribution of this poor, urban poor, in terms of GHG is the least, but in terms of the vulnerability, they are the highest. Because if there is a rain, if there is a flood, if there is a heat stress, then they are the most affected. This is the kind of heat map many people are generating. As you know, this year the summer has been very crude to us. Large amount of states have seen a major risk in terms of heat wave and potential drought. But this is a study which is being done by Asian Development Bank, but it clearly shows that our cities have multiple, climatic risk. Heat wave, flood, cyclone, drought, and water scarcity, etc., etc. And the larger the city, as all of you read in the newspaper, Bangalore is crying, Lucknow last week were crying about flooding and other things. Most problem is that whenever a city has this kind of a climatic risk, the most affected are the people who are living below, residing below the poverty line. Like this is Ahmedabad, and Ahmedabad is, these are all, if you can see with the land surface temperature, you can see the changes because there is a lot of reduction in the green cover, and there are a lot of heat. But what happens in this is that increasing heat, this is Chennai, the similar, but in this heat what happens is the most affected is not Dr. Luthra, not Dr. Ravi, or not Mr. Jaswant Singh, it's not Shashwat, because it's the most affected would be the urban poor. And they, because of their, the kind of housing, the kind of roof cover, the kind of design that they have, they get the most exposure. Sometime in Ahmedabad, we are collaborating with one of the local NGOs to look at the kind of thermal comfort in the urban slums in Ahmedabad. And we realize that in a hot summer, the inside temperatures rises up. Some of the inside material is almost about 48 to 50 degrees. So these are the kind of things. So whenever we are looking at some of this risk, this is Chennai. So I showed you about the heat risk, and now this is the, the that in terms of how many people, how many, and whenever there is also, sea level rise, it is the poor people. Almost 20% of total slums, about 2.5 lakh population in Chennai is going to get flooded. And if you add on all this risk in terms of heat risk, in terms of sea level rise or urban flooding, those kind of risk, it is the urban poor who who gets most affected, because higher risk in the high density slum. And generally, as you all know, I mean, in urban planning, even those are the low-lying areas where most of the, poverty, poor people live into this thing. And it is not only that, their settlement, but also the infrastructure. The infrastructure, physical or social infrastructure, amenities get greatly affected. And the same is the story. This is a story of city of Kochi. And when you see, there is a rise in the water or rise in the sea level, what happens in this kind of thing. So far, in various assessment, IPCC have been quite silent about urban. But fortunately, this year, IPCC Assessment Report 6 has clearly put a thrust on energy, land use, industry, urban, building and transportation, particularly cities and urban area. For a change, there is a greater recognition about better urban planning, sustainable production and consumption. And as you all know, our Honorable Prime Minister has recently given a very interesting slogan about called Life for Environment, LIFE, which is basically talking about sustainable production and consumption of goods, and also how you increase the carbon uptake in storage, and apply planning, orient your planning both in terms of mitigation and also in adaptation, in terms of whether it is green building, zero carbon. Now, that if you look at how the role cities or settlement can play, one is that it can actually, contribute to the resilience in through mitigation, like reductions, sustainable goods, services, material, enabling design, regulation, forms and function, decarbonization of construction, operation, transport, building. But at the same time, cities can also advance action towards climate adaptation, climate shocks, stresses like heat and cold, better thermal comfort for urban poor. Similarly, disaster resilience when there is an earthquake, flooding, cyclone, and so on. So conceptually, when you say resilience, that what we are saying is resilience of infrastructure assets can then contribute to resilience of the blue box. That if your assets are, can be made resilient, the services are resilient. If the services are resilient, the users are resilient. And if the users are resilient, then there is the city is resilient and also become a kind of more competitive in nature. And that's how globally cities are trying to, develop this whole discipline called risk informed planning, how you can embed risk in your planning approaches, and then you allocate your land use. These are some of the, these are category, like you can risk, high risk, yellow, green and purple. During the COVID time in Ahmedabad, with the commissioner, we also attempted to do a kind of a COVID risk land use classification, so that their people, their response delivery, because at some point of time, every day about 5,000 cases were rising, and they didn't know what to respond, what would be the priority in terms of. So you can actually, whether it is planning and management, you can do. Lot of cities globally also reducing their risk by changing, by doing some, kind of a massive investment program. This is one called making room for the river, where there is a river, is a settlement is readjusted to allow the river to flow, so that that the river, the risk is reduce of the flood risk is reduced. This is an image of Singapore. Like, as you know, many urban planner, urban designer who came back from USA from 70s and 80s, one effort was actually concretizing the waterfront, so that there is an access, people can bicycle. But recent flooding in European Union, Germany, and other things, they realize the concrete is the enemy of flood. It actually accentuates. So now many cities are deconcretizing their waterfront. As you see the right, left and right, the same image, Kalang in Singapore. Most of the cities are removing their waterfront and making them more nature-based so that their resilience can be. This is a very famous picture of this water plaza in Rotterdam, Bentham. This is another like city, like this is New York. It's like, building. These are all physical resilience building measure. This project is called Dry Line, which is to protect, bring the nature to closer, and then to create a kind of battery of green cover to protect yourself. And there are a lot of work is being done into how a pressing thermal comfort can be generated through green or green infrastructure, be it. Most importantly, that's what I thought I'll share this image today, which is like when you say this is we are talking about this mind the gap and leave no place behind. In Ahmedabad, these are kind of a slum pockets where I was telling, the thermal comfort rises the thermal, the temperature becomes so hot during summer. And our adaptation is like we go home and we start running in air condition and so on and so forth, or drink water. These people don't have. And this is the work which is being done with the SEPT, and there is an NGO called MHT, Mahila Housing Trust, trying to look at how planning can contribute in terms of, developing a mud roof or, the thermal reflective paints by changing the design, changing the, So whenever we are saying it is not only the physical resilience alone, but along with that, you also have to see the social resilience aspect of it. That whether these people have enough, livelihood support, whether the people who are living have social amenities and infrastructure, and most importantly, the social network that they have. And that's what I wanted to share, that, whenever we are saying mind the gap, in most of our, physical planning processes or urban planning school or GIS-based master plan, we forget about that 30% or 35% of our people and 60 to 70% of our economy falls under this informal sector. And they may not have a formal record to show you or the tenures, that GIS cadastral data, etc. But they thrive in our city, and they actually make our cities most vibrant. And I think that's what we need to, today's seminar that we are working, I think we need to look at that, mind that gaze gap. Whenever we are seated, in our GIS room or, studios on computer graphics, because in GIS is everything looks yellow, in some form of yellow or darker patches kind of thing. But remember that every pixel there is somebody's home, somebody's dream. So we must mind this gap, come out of our technocratic approach to go down to these vulnerable communities and integrate them in our planning process. Our city can't become resilient by just making some green building certification. I mean, Jaswantji was there recently and we were discussing less than 5% of India's building assets are certified by those platinum, etc., etc. So you have to think approaches, because next 25 years, we have to build every year close to 4 million houses. Now, if you want to build 4 million houses and we have to make them resilient, so we have to really rethink, and so that our housing is inclusive, green, as well as affordable. Lastly, I want to just leave, I think because many of you joining from Amritsar, this is the old city of Ahmedabad. I mean, this is like, then this place was also kind of, received this 2017, the UNESCO World Heritage. Till today, even this summer has been very harsh in Ahmedabad. Generally, what happened in Ahmedabad is like when I was a student in late 80s, Ahmedabad daytime used to be warmer and evening times used to be very cool because a lot of sea breeze, land breeze kind of phenomena. But this, for last few years, the temperature is not dropping. As a result, many people in the western and the newer part, we have to continue to run our air conditioning both daytime in the night time late to maintain the thermal comfort. And this settlement that I'm showing, the traditional housing which is 600 years old, they're called pole. Poles are called pratolis in Sanskrit or gate. In spite of this harsh heat, till this summer, not a single building unit had to use air conditioning. And they are still into that, that the thermal comfort retain in spite of this harshness. So maybe our, that, as you know, many of when you fly Indigo, the air hostesses always say that aapke jo nearest exit door could be behind our back. Similarly, when you are looking up all this, green, affordable planning, etc., maybe some of the answers for our future cities can be found in our, traditional planning, traditional. So looking back our history and the way we have planned our cities and so communities, I think some of the answers could be found there in this. Thank you very much. This is an opportunity, as I call this, is a building back better, because the projection various trajectory showing we have to really 400 million people have to be accommodated in our towns and cities. So this is the opportunity, and I think World Habitat Day, beyond this celebration, all the planning community, students have to take this, how we can actually build our cities better and make them safer. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Luthra, Dr. Ravi, all colleagues from GNDU. Thank you for inviting me, and I wish you a very happy World Habitat Day. Thank you.
I thank Professor Shashwat for sharing his in-depth knowledge with our esteemed participants. The demonstration of practical knowledge and vast experiences has made the talk an everlasting memory. Now, I would like to welcome the second distinguished speaker of the day, Shri Shailendra Kaushik. He is a co-founder of Cities Forum, which is global strategic advisory firm and is highly specialized in smart cities and smart mobility projects. They provide strategic advice to public and private sector clients, including national and regional governments, and assist them in meeting their sustainable development targets using smart solutions. He is an urban and mobility planning expert with more than 20 years of experience and is currently based in Dubai. Sir has worked across Asia, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and Pacific region, and has extensive experience on futuristic planning studies, strategic high-impact projects in sustainable development, and innovative financing solutions on urban infrastructure and mobility projects, and is currently leading several projects on electric mobility, developing data-driven mobility solutions, first and last mile connectivity using non-motorized modes. Now, I warmly welcome Shailendra sir to share his knowledge and enlighten our participants.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Thank you, Professor Luthra, for giving me this opportunity to speak. So I hope I am audible. Let me present my screen to you.
Yes, sir.
You can see my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining. So it's an honor to speak at a school, where I have studied in my earlier part of the education. So I did bachelor from GRD School of Planning. So hello everyone. So all the students. So today I'm talking about, on the theme which is currently this year, Mind the Gap. So I don't want to go into detail, but my talk, I'm focusing on the urban mobility sector, that how this growing inequality and challenges in cities and human settlement are affecting the urban mobility provision, and how with the mobility transition which is happening, as a practitioners, what we should focus on. So this is my theme. So who we are, we are a global strategic think tank. So we are headquartered in UK, and we are highly specialized in cities sector. The company has been co-founded by international experts. So we have experts in more than 45 countries, and we provide expertise to cities and companies around the area of technology and data, and how these data and technology can help the cities in terms of achieving the sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. So if you look at this slide, SDG, so SD, Sustainable Development Goal was launched in year 2015. And SDG 11 talks about making cities more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So from 2015, we are now in 2022. And the theme for this year Habitat Day is Mind the Gap, Leave No One and No Place Behind. So which nothing but, talks about that inclusive development, inclusive cities. So over the past 7 years, does it mean that nothing has been done? But yes, things have been done. The cities have been changing. But if you look at it, over the last 7 years, there were many challenges which has come. And COVID-19, so as UN Habitat says, triple C crisis, which is COVID-19, climate and conflict, that has potentially resulted into growing inequality and vulnerability in the cities. So that is what as a practitioners, as an academicians, we need to understand that how these challenges are impacting our cities, and as a practitioners, how and what we should focus on while we deliver any of the project, or while we develop any of the policy, or while we do any of the project implementation. So as cities are going through transformation, if you look at over the past few years, more than half of the world population lives in cities, and this trend of moving from rural area to urban area is growing every day. And soon, almost three-quarter of the entire population will be living, once the new generation comes in inner cities. So at the same time, we have to create this balance, this triangle, that when we do any city planning or any mobility planning or any infrastructure planning exercise, it has to be sustainable, it has to be resilient, it has to be inclusive. But what is happening right now, if you look at it, the data is influencing the way cities are behaving. Practically everyone has got the smartphone, and that smartphone generate huge amount of data, which if can be used, it can really make the city management very easy. Technology, a lot of technology solutions are being deployed in the cities. There are a lot of digital solution as a result of this, which is basically making the change the way cities are functioning. We are talking a lot about smart cities. So every city is now aspiring to be smart cities. When I used to study, we used to study urban planning, but now the profession has been changed to urban tech, and a lot of universities, companies are launching urban tech as something very, very unique. I'm sorry. And now this growing thing, which is metaverse, so every city wants to be in the virtual world, so that you don't, interact in the physical world, you interact in the metaverse, the way we are doing this meeting. So parallelly, you are creating a digital twin for each of these cities. So this is what the changes are happening across cities, and around these changes, we have to see that how we can meet this, UN Habitat theme. So this is regarding the technology changes. At the same time, what is happening, the technology infrastructure is being deployed. In case of Indian cities, you are seeing, integrated command and control center has been set up in almost all these smart cities. Massive electrification project, you are making electric buses, electric cars, electric bike, everything. So massive transformation of transportation is happening. At the same time, in order to do that, infrastructure upgrade is happening. So a lot of changes are around the cities. But the idea is that we should, the idea behind all these projects, that we should have an economic prosperities around the cities. And in order to gain the economic prosperities, there are multiple sectors which you have to focus on. So Professor talked about resilient. I think Rajneesh is talking about housing or environment. So I'm talking about mobility, because which is also an important aspect when it comes to inclusive, sustainable, and resilient cities. So within these, overall framework of changing dynamism across the cities, having user at the theme, so much investments are happening around cities. The cities are growing, smaller cities are becoming medium cities are becoming larger cities, the rural areas are being transformed as semi-urban areas. Semi-urban areas are transformed into smaller cities. So a lot is happening. So how we should, create this whole change around the theme of mind the gap, leave no one behind, and leave no place behind. So I have construct the whole theme into three parts. So one is the mind the gap. So as a mobility planner, mind the gap means we need to understand what the gap is in our cities. So we need to calculate the gap in mobility provision. So practically, what is the requirement, which is missing in our cities? And as a planner, our job is that we should come out with the requirement which could be, help make cities more sustainable, more resilient, and more user friendly. Leave no one behind. So leave no one behind means we have to consider all the users in planning or developing the projects. So if you see, look at your master plan, or look at your zonal plan, or look at your mobility plan, are we looking at all the users, which are basically to be using that particular project or that particular proposal what you are working on? So we have to consider from the user's perspective all these requirements. Leave no place behind means accessibility to all the places. So requirement is something as part of this theme we need to understand. Users is some second thing which we have to consider in our proposals, in our policy making, in our plan making, and accessibility is the third thing. So if you deconstruct this theme, these three things are very, very important. So I'm touching upon each of these three things, that how with the changing transformation of cities, these three things are important. So if you look at requirement, so paradigm shift is happening in the mode planning. So when we used to study in school, so we used to build these transportation models which are always focused toward road building, which are always focused about how the roads would handle the car traffic within these particular future years, and then accordingly what sort of how many lanes are required and all sort of thing. That is what we used to do. And then we pull around some kind of public transportation line and see how the transportation, how the trips can be moved away from car to public transportation. So the entire focus over the past few years I've seen as a result of this COVID-19, the priorities have been changed. So when we are talking about, so I live in Dubai, I work in European countries also. So the priority of city planning has been changed. When we plan now, so first focus we are doing is, can we do a better walking and cycling infrastructure, which could cater to the local trips so that people don't have to use their car. So we've done some study along with, in fact, SEPT Ahmedabad during the COVID, that what are the changes which would likely to come as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And one finding, this was 3 years ago when the COVID has started, came out very, very clear that cities need to focus on more walking and cycling. If you see Indian cities, traditionally we cycle, traditionally we walk. Almost half the trips in our cities are walking and cycling trips. So are we doing enough in terms of making those trips sustain, making those users who are doing walking and cycling providing their quality infrastructure? So a lot of initiatives have been done, but a start has been done, but a lot has to be done. So this is what we need to understand. So as a planner, you need to come out with, in terms of the requirement. For example, in Amritsar, how many cycling lane you need, or how many footpath, how many kilometer of footpath you need. Come out with that requirement as part of the first part of this year theme. And then second is intermediate public transport is the backbone of our cities. So a lot of first mile, last mile connectivity is being done through intermediate public transportation. So how we can streamline IPT into our overall mode planning. So we've done recently a study for Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs regarding deployment of mobility as a service. So when I call mobility as a service, the image comes in, say, tech driven solution. But we basically developed a model which is more India centric, where all these modes could be joined together and offer an integrated trip planning experience. So that is the second priority. Then the third priority is bus and rail based public transportation system, that how we can provide bus based system, and the city need, large city, how we can provide a rail based system. And then the fourth priority is coming to the motor vehicles. So they, it is not that cars are bad. In case you have to travel for say 40-50 kilometer, there is no public transport, you have to rely on car. But the idea is that how we can, there is one study or one initiative which is going along with GSN is called avoid, shift and improve. So how we can avoid the unnecessary travel, how we can shift from private car to public transport mode, and how we can improve upon the services. So ASI model is something which is basically has to be considered. So the idea is that when we calculate the requirement, what is required, the priority should be first study the walking and cycling trip, followed by the intermediate public transport, then public transport, and then motor vehicle, and then try to see that how an integrated transportation system you can develop for the city. So rather than looking into cities in isolation, so I've seen when in any city master plan or land use plan is being done, and then transport plan is being done, and then water and sanitation plan is being done. So all these plan have got different timeline. So ideally, I'm working in Chennai, so they have advertised now the land use planning along with the transportation plan, because all these plan need to talk to each other. So that is where, which is very, very important, that whatever multi-sectoral plan as a city you develop, so make it consistent for a year, so that the requirement can be understood in totality as part of this whole thing. Then coming to the second part in terms of user. So the first part is requirement. So second part is the user. So user-centric planning, is something which basically is being required. If you see inclusive mobility planning, so are we looking into all the users together? So first thing is children. So when we design any public transport system, or when we design any road crossing, or when we design any bus stop, so whether this facility align with the requirement of the children, who would be using, whether alone or with their parents, or something which you need to be doing. Second is elderly. So look into the elderly population. What is their requirement in terms of better accessibility, in terms of safe travel in public transportation, or some kind of designated places, or some kind of reserve seating, something like that. So this is the second user group you need to understand. Third is women. So it is not about women are weaker, but it is more about that every gender has got different requirements. So look into the requirement of women when you do your city plan. For example, a simple thing which Indore has done in terms of sanitation. If you look at, Indore has won almost 6 times in a year the cleanest city. Because if you see in Indore, every half a kilometer you can find a public toilet which is specific to gender. So that is a very a small intervention, but it can make a lot of difference. So that is something you need to understand, or you need to look into while you develop your plan. Urban poor is something, because if you look at our economic sector in cities, they are the key workers across our industries in manufacturing sector. So you will have to look into the requirement of urban poor while designing your city. Your transportation system is something you will have to do. And people with special needs. So that is, there are a lot of guidelines in our cities, but are we following those guidelines while we design our system? So we are working in a project right now where, the entire transportation system is to be designed for all these user group. So my take is that, we were designing this whole thing, and when we thought that if you are designing your city or transportation system for children, so it caters to practically all the vulnerable group. That is something you will have to do. So when profession or professionals like us, or when academicians, when you teach in your, or when you do some kind of studio exercise, look into that how I should develop a user-centric planning. So that is something which is very, very important considering the theme for this year. And then when you design this whole system or plan, it has to be safe, affordable, and user-friendly. So these 3 questions should be asked. So whenever we do any project, we will look into the specific requirement of these 5 group and see that how my proposal is safe for these user group, whether it is affordable for these group, and whether it is user friendly. So that is something any plan should answer for. Then accessibility is the third theme. So third is basically I have gone into, so leave no one place behind. So leave no one place behind. If you look at the spatial planning point of view. So accessibility need to be provided for all the places. So what is happening in case of accessibility? So accessibility is also going through change. So when 10 years or more than a decade ago, accessibility means provision of a road. So but right now what is happening, it has changed. So apart from road, accessibility means providing road along with a safe, affordable and convenient transport system. So that is a change which has come. And with lot of data and technology deployment happening, again, the accessibility means that you will have to not only provide road or affordable transport system, but also digital connectivity. So like India is moving from a paper ticket for public transport to paperless ticket. You can see that the availability of the bus on your smartphone. So all these things. So the definition of accessibility is being changed. So whenever you design any transportation system or any public transport plan or any city plan, you will have to see accessibility does not only mean road. It means that along with the road, you should have a quality public transport system and the digital connectivity. If all three, all three areas are covered, that means you are giving a good accessibility concept. But again, these things are easier said than done, because we are working in one of the state in India for the past 1.5 year. There are a lot of challenges coming along. While you design the system, you can arrange for the funding, you can implement, but at the same time there are a lot of barriers which comes across. So one is the technical barrier, so access to technology. So that is something we will have to see. Cost of upgrade, in case you are providing a technology, so there is a cost associated with this. Design challenges, because whether you have the manpower who understand all these things in totality. So these are the key challenge, but the best part or good part is that a lot of capacity building measures are happening. So this particular barrier is being mitigated. The risk associated with this barrier is being mitigated. Second is the affordability barrier. So low level of affordability. In case of Indian cities, if you look at it, it's a very, very price sensitive market. If you have to do a good quality public transport system, let me give you an example. For example, if a city wants to procure a bus with, when you procure a bus with chassis and do bodybuilding separately, which is a conventional way of providing buses in India, it costs you about 20-25 lakh. If you do a fully built bus, so 25 lakh becomes 50 lakh. If you do a bus with a low floor, which is a single floor access, so the 50 lakh become the 70 lakh. And if you add the air condition on top of it, so 70 lakh will become 80-85 lakh. So whether our cities are ready, which conventionally providing public transport using buses with 25-30 lakh, can they afford to provide buses with say 75-80 lakh? So the answer lies is perhaps yes, because once you have good quality public transport system, you will have more users. So you will have to develop the project looking into the overall aspect, but that is something, it's a price sensitive market. So that is something Indian cities need to work on. But again, the best part is that government is providing a lot of financial support in terms of meeting that affordability barrier. So you can see in terms of electric mobility, there is some kind of subsidy scheme. In terms of FAME is happening, where government is providing subsidy up to 40%, in terms of meeting that affordability gap. So then economic barriers. So all these solutions come at a price. So your capex cost is always very, very high, but providing the solution which is always friendly to all these user group, like people of special need or women or elderly or child, the cities still feel that what benefit do I derive from it? It is very difficult to sell off a plan which is basically friendly for all the user group, because I'm being very honest, but let me tell you, when we are doing some work with some cities, and then when you provide some kind of proposal which are helpful for disabled people, they say hardly someone use that. So whether is it something good investment or not? But inclusivity means that everyone should get a pie of it. So that is what but this mentality is still to be done, and we are seeing still, because of the funding constraint or because of a lot of other associated challenges, this is still a concern which the cities in India need to work on. Again, there are infrastructure barriers. So it is not about, for example, right now a lot of electric mobility is happening in case of Indian cities, where cities are procuring low floor electric buses. But whether low floor electric buses, our physical infrastructure is also ready, whether my bus terminal or bus stops are also ready along with that. Even if you provide disabled friendly buses, whether the side streets or the road crossings are friendly with those things. So all those things, the infrastructure is a linked project. It is not about one thing you do, another thing you left behind, so that the overall, in totality, you don't get that kind of benefit. So those infrastructure barrier also need to be addressed. But the way things happens, not only in Indian cities, in multiple cities, every sector different authority, and those authority coordination between those authorities are very, very challenging. So that is something we are seeing cities need to gear up onto that.
Mr.
Policy
Shilendra,
barrier. Yes, sir.
sorry to disturb you, but time is limited. Kindly conclude.
Yeah, sure. I'll finish it off. Then policy barrier is another thing which basically need to be done. The policies, we've reviewed some policies. These are very, very loosely drafted, and there is always a room for variance. So all those things need to be looked into while we design this whole thing. So the important factor to be considered is, in terms of planning and implementation, you should consider the user-centric planning, identify the target group, list the requirement, make a compliance checklist, post-implementation, do an inclusivity audit. In terms of funding, a lot of cities are now started doing compliance-based funding. If your design is inclusive, then you get funding. So private institutions are also asking for inclusive planning. And then third aspect is the capacity building, where you need to sensitize your government authorities, private consultant, and other associated stakeholder the importance of building a user friendly design. So this is the last slide. So thank you so much for hearing with me. So
Thank you,
thanks,
Mr. Shilendra, for throwing light on different aspects of transportation and the planning in general. Because this mind the gap is a very open-ended kind of theme, where a lot of things can be deliberated, and it is where limiting the time itself is an injustice to the speaker, I would say. But thank you very much for acceding to our request. And because the next speaker is at the airport right now, as I told you earlier. He has already sent me a message. So thank you very much, Mr. Shilendra, for your kind deliberation. We will discuss something in the question and answer session, and your presence at this platform is requested, please. Now I request, first of all, I welcome Dr. Shabnam Hundal from Nanak University, Finland, who has joined us for this webinar. Dr. Hundal, are you there? Dr. Hundal, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank you very much for sparing your valuable time from the airport itself. So I would request Dr. Chima to introduce Dr. Hundal, please.
Okay, now I would like to introduce the next resource person of the day, Dr. Shabnamjeet Hundal. Dr. Hundal is working as a senior lecturer of financial management at Nanak University of Applied Sciences. Earlier, he worked at the Ministry of Education, Singapore as well. Hundal has published several scientific articles in the field of corporate finance and corporate governance. He is on the advisory and editorial board of several journals, including Corporate and Business Strategy Review and Journal of Governance and Regulation. Hundal is a member of Finance Finland Academy and a consultant to 3 SMEs located in Helsinki and Jyväskylä. Now I warmly welcome Dr. Shabnamjeet Hundal to share his valuable knowledge with the participants.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sri.
Dr. Hundal, I see snow behind you. Is it snow or what?
I know this is just a kind of, they have made some artifact by carving the big rock right at the airport.
Yeah,
So,
thank you very much. And
yeah, fortunately the snow hasn't come yet.
okay.
Otherwise, otherwise I would have been wearing a couple of more layers on top of it. So.
Thank you. And would you like me to blow your presentation, or you will?
Yeah, if you can. Otherwise, I have to. Maybe you can continue together.
I'm putting it on. Is it okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I start my presentation, and as I have been introduced, my name is Shyam Hundal, and I work as a senior lecturer in finance, and I also take care of the finance and corporate governance research track that we do in our university. My field of research is corporate finance and corporate governance, but for the last couple of years, I have slightly having this new tangent towards sustainable finance. So if you slightly go down the slide, yeah. So the interest in sustainable finance has definitely increased by leaps and bounds, especially in the last, I would say, about 2 decades. I would show you some visuals where you would see that in 2006, there was nearly nothing about sustainable finance. But now, thanks to United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, the number has really increased exponentially, both in terms of the signatories, the private fund or the private investors, which are massive in their own rights. They are the big hedge funds, they're big investment houses. The numbers has increased, unimaginable amount, and the amount of assets which has been invested in the responsible projects, which are certified by the UN as the responsible investment projects. The number has increased over 100 trillion in 2020, and I would show you in the next slide. Actually, it's now touching almost 120 trillion. Definitely, if we can define sustainable finance or sustainable investment as per our whims and fancies. But if I have to give more concrete definition or the concrete set of parameters as prescribed by the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment, these are the 3 ethos which must be entailed in some investment project which can be reckoned as sustainable finance project. And you can see that there are environmental pillars. Most of my research is explicitly or implicitly is inclusive of the governance issues. I think the slides are, yeah, coming again. Next, please. And in this visuals, you can see that if you see the left on the left side, the vertical column, you would see that in 2006 there was nearly zero amount of assets invested in the sustainable finance. But now in 21, as I said before, the number is nearly touching 120 trillion dollar, which is a whopping amount of money. I mean, who could ever conceive some 2 decades or maybe a decade and a half ago that this idea would be so much welcomed? I know in the beginning when the sustainable finance issue or the concept was launched, or at least it was in the very infancy stage, people would say that it's just like a fashionable term, it will come and go. But over the time, things have been very much, conducive for sustainable finance. Next, please. Yeah. So, but at the same time, there are some challenges which we need to go through. Uh, we need, even though we already have about quite a massive amount to fulfill the Paris goals, to support the sustainable projects and transitions, because the transition is very important. There are many projects which are not yet to be termed as sustainable, but should we leave them halfway through? Definitely not. We need to make this transition as seamless as possible. But the fact of the matter is that it's not cheaper, it's not costless. There is a cost, and to move this to undertake this transition process, the governments required $206 billion to fulfill this gap, which is a big amount. One can argue that this is not a very big amount in relative sense, but if you look at the last 3 years, the governments are spending so much money to get rid of the effects and the after effects of COVID-19 that some of the priorities are at the back burner. And sustainable finance, unfortunately, is also at the back burner because the immediate priority of the states is to how to face this existential threat, which is unprecedented. We all know that I'm talking about COVID-19. If you look at the climate risk, it has increased tremendously. In a recent study by the United Nations, it says that the external, the corporate risk, which essentially come from the climate issues, has increased by 150%, and this is a massive amount of risk. And at the same time, not just financial or technical, I think it's a matter of mindset. There is need to have a big shift in terms of mindset, where we are becoming more long-termist, where we are able to take care of the future in a more cohesive manner. And I can give you a couple of examples that we do in Finland, where we actually have proved that in the short term, the traditional sense of profit motiveness of the companies and the sustainability can come in conflict, but only in the short period. But in the long period, they both are actually quite cohesive. They go hand in hand. I mean, I meet many corporate people on day in, day out basis. I also meet people who are into sustainability. And often we see that they are at the tug of war, but this conflict is only in the short period, for the immediate period. But when you see the long period, they are very much in sync. I can give you one example. We have a very famous company called Neste. It's an oil refinery based in not far away from the place where I'm sitting at the Helsinki airport. I think its headquarters is only 2 kilometers away. If you can go to the next slide, please. This company, this link, the URL I have shared at the bottom of the page. This company was an oil refinery. It still is an oil refinery. And this company, being an oil refinery company, was accused of tampering with the nature and all those, causing affluence here and there. But then the leadership took a decision that, hey, come what may, even though we become incompetitive in the short period, even though we are not able to achieve our key performance indicators for the first 5, 6, 10 years, it doesn't matter. Even if we are accused, even if we have to take loan, we need to request the government, the bailout. We'll do all these things. But once we achieve a certain minimum benchmark of sustainability, then things will become self-propelling. And this came out to be true. This company, Neste, took a big risk by being an offbeat, by acting as an odd man. Because in the oil companies, the competition is so stiff that nobody wants to lose the market. However, this company has proved that no, with a little bit of sacrifice, with a little bit of patience, you can achieve what you want to achieve. Finally, I can show that I can discuss with you that a lot of things are under discussion these days in terms of sustainable finance. A lot of research is going on about the corporate reporting about sustainability and how we make the actions or inaction of sustainability so transparent. I'm here in Finland. I'm going to this point one. Accounting standards and rules all over the world are being developed, which are more compatible to sustainability. So far, they were not, but the journey is not completed yet, but a lot has already been done in terms of developing taxonomy and the standards, the rules, the best practices, and also our financial markets, the capital markets, they are not yet fully compatible to sustainability. I mean, not even we don't even have the proper, the brokers who can deal in those assets which are sustainability compliance, and those things are being taken place quite fast, I would say, thanks to the sheer size of the market growth and thanks to the investors' positive attitude. So I think things have gone really for good. That's everything I want to say. But folks, please feel free to keep in touch. If you ever have any query about sustainability and the financial issues, it'd be nice to collaborate with you in the future. So thank you very much. That was all about my short presentation.
I thank Dr. Shab Hundal for sharing his vast experiences about sustainable finance and the current research trends. Now, I would like to introduce the next learned speaker of the day, Shri Rajneesh Sareenji. He works as Program Director for Sustainable Habitat Program with the Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. With a work experience of over 21 years in sustainability and built environment, he is leading the program's several research, advocacy, and capacity building initiatives. Some of these initiatives are on sustainable urbanization, resource efficiency and sufficiency, circular economy.
Section which is named as a habitat department only. So I think the theme goes very appropriate with it. Because largely what we are doing is understanding how these two connections of habitat, climate are working together. Today is one of that day. I think the theme is, the sub-theme is also very appropriate, or the yearly theme where it talks about the mind again. So yes, there are a lot of, I think you can say the definitions or maybe the terms which have been given to understand. Largely adaptation, resilience, habitats, and how they are going to respond to this. But largely, if I try to, in a nutshell, put the things across, I think the climate, or maybe you can say the finance minister of the country, is not going according to the way it is. So either you're getting more floodings, you're getting more temperature rise, and at CSE, at Center of Science and Environment, we've been monitoring this for a long time. And I think and this is leading us to something which is called climate inequity, or you can say as well as the cooling inequity, which is existing now in the cities to a large extent. Now, when we work on equality, we work on something which is the shared resources for all. And I think Professor Shashwat has already given you a lot of examples how the inequities within the city space are there increasing. So you tend to see the rising heat, which is there. So he's given you certain maps which shows where the heat index are increasing. And heat added with the humidity is another factor which is rising to a lot of concerns. That's why cities are now responding towards something. That's where he's mentioned, I think Shailendra has mentioned, or Professor Shashwat has mentioned that now the COP is looking after the urban issues in the sector, which is more associated and concerned with the kind of world which we live in. So these are some of the facts which I'm running behind the screens or maybe slides which I'm changing. This is giving you various different proportions of that. What are these issues and concerns are we talking about? And it's not one time we have been talking for years now altogether. So we are talking about why this thermal comfort, how it needs to be brought into the fabric, because this understanding was very prevalent, as I think one of the photographs was shown from Ahmedabad, as well as the medieval characteristics, which was, or the medieval kind of planning has been shared to you, that how the cities or the communities used to have those, you can say the knowledge and the experience to respond to the weather changes which is there. Now these weather changes which were like understood very well, and the fluctuations were read, the material response, the planning response, or the way the development is going to respond largely to it was very well understood. Slowly, I think with an increase of number, with decrease of multiple level of interventions, national and international, somewhere we got a little confused with it. But let's see, I'll try to solve this within, I don't think so this problem could be solved within this seminar or 10 minutes and all. I'll try to see how much justice I can do so that you get a little better understanding and directions as your own to take. So adaptations are two types. One is the autonomous and the other one is the anticipatory or proactive. So the Mendak jo poem hota na wo bhi adapt karta hai. But the anticipatory. Slides are not changing?
Yeah, slides are not working because you did not go to the full screen. So first you go to full screen and then the slides will be moving.
I think there is, or maybe I have to do entire screen.
Yes, entire screen, then there would be some black screen, click on it, then share, and then put your slides. Can you move? Yes, now they are moving.
Now they're moving? Okay, quickly, I'll just recap it. So the finance minister is not behaving, the untimely rains are there, rising heat is there. There are a lot of statistics which is being put up on CSC, which you can refer to. So even the cover stories are coming where we're talking about the heat and how it's being needs to be internalized. So where I was on a current slide where we were talking about two types of adaptation. One is like autonomous adaptive or reactive one, and the other one is anticipatory. So because we are planner, we have to work on the second one, which is a proactive adaptation or anticipatory. So what are we understanding right now? We do have flood events, we will have increased precipitation, increased heat. Then how are we going to work towards that? So there is some kind of trajectory which has been given to us under the India Cooling Action Plan. We'll be trying to look at the software and hardware was also mentioned. Like there are city softwares where you have a response cells, where you have your GIS mapping, you have all those protocols are in place, and then there is a hardware which is there in terms of infrastructure and response. So both these needs to go hand in hand. And how these are going to come, even in fact, the codes and practices are also changing. For example, there are addendums which are being done where we are looking at a climate responsive building design and adaptive design techniques. We're looking at long-term cooling strategies as a larger. So this is not what CSC is talking. This is where the government of India is also looking at as a response to it. So what we do, we keep bringing up a lot of publications for you. Like for example, this is thermal comfort was one of the terms which was referred. So this book refers to that. Then in fact, housing was mentioned. So this is what we do on the report card of housing. Then even the fiscal was being mentioned. So we try to look at the connections of fiscal and affordable housing to that. Then we try to look at the mobility and the aspects which are related to it, how these mass housing and how they are ground realities of livability, the concern which is under livability, mobility, the connectivities becomes one of the important parameters. Then we try to work with the governments to bring up something which is a guidelines so that at least the future stock of housing and as well as the area or the larger planning could be made code appropriate. Then in fact the new stream which is coming on rental housing, we started looking at that in trying to fix it that because wherever every opportunity which comes into the market and wonder what kind of schemes government puts it up to you, this is always a way that any of the intelligent people who are working in the market will try to utilize into the benefits which we require in the society. And CNB, for example, becomes one of the important areas because that's where the resource planning happens. Your materials, what circular economy is effectively, if you make one-way traffic, so effectively what will happen is you will be able to use that road only for one side. So if you make it circular, then at least it will be used both ways. So these are some of the concepts which are already there with us, but we are trying to bring it back so that because now the kind of development which we see around requires all these interventions. Like breathable indoors, COVID was being talked about. So a lot of space of ventilation which is there, which is also part of the thermal comfort to great extent, is being explored at here. Self-built housing technologies. Many of your materials were not there. NTPC, when they made 2018, when they made the material code for you, they forgot to introduce the traditional technology which was there already. Now, when we talk about in 2022, the revised BNTPC codes or the compendiums at least have a mention of traditional technology, or at least 8 or 9 of them are now mentioned on that. So these are some of the efforts which we have been putting up to bring up the materials, the interface of thermal comfort, bringing the larger discussion of cooling and the codes, the practices, the city, because housing is a state subject, so how the states needs to respond. So these are some of the facts and figures which we are working on. In fact, a lot of these works joins with the air pollution also, because effectively, as we see in some of the presentations, pollution becomes one of the important factors to be worked at if you're working on a cooling strategies to a great extent. So this is largely what we do. We look at the thermal comfort, housing, we look at the climate resilience of the city, and circular economy. All these fit, actually the two verticals fits into the climate resilient cities model more, where we try to see that how these could be implemented. So how we do this, and why we do this, for example, a particular housing project, if you look at, the impact is huge. You're talking about 15, 16,000 houses, 60,000 residents, you're talking about the big numbers here. Now imagine, the people do not have a control of the space what you build it to them. Space as well as the layout, the choice of material, nothing is there in their hand. So who's actually controlling this? It's you who's the controller factor in this. So you are deciding the materials, you are deciding the architectural services, you are deciding the planning requirements. All these things adds up into something. Even the small decision of switching from your brick to a precast concrete, it has a huge amount of energy, trajectory, issues and concerns. So I think we talk about climate change, but we are not very serious and concerned about it. We're still serious about economics. We are more serious about the economics and the gains which comes to us, because I think the climate change is the gain or the loss which we are not even anticipatory so far very well. Otherwise, these kind of constructions would not have been there with us. All these, like sit on a concrete bench and you will understand what is there when it happens right in the, when the sun is shining and you are there on the concrete bench, you understand what is the variation. And similarly, these structures are going to stand right in front of you. And I think the logics do not fit here. Then we started looking at, it's okay, maybe one or two affordable housing. We started looking at the RERA project database which was there. We went into cities, done surveys to understand what is this. So effectively what we understood is that this thali which you used to have a material split is now becoming one-sided game. It is moving towards Maivan, it's moving towards concrete or cement-based structures more than as compared to anything. I do understand you will say that structures are growing tall, they require certain things, but there are a lot of fusions and other activities which are possible. So for example, another interesting project which we do is in West Bengal and Amritsar, try to understand that what are the materials which is there when you go into a little peri-urban spaces. The moment you go to little peri-urban spaces, what happens is the thali comes back to you. So that means there are informed choices more maybe in rural or in peri-urban as compared to what is in the urban setup first. Why this is being done? Like for example, this is map of research. Try to see that how much traditional technologies and where they are located at. So you definitely find a lot of mix which is there. Many of these technologies are usable, could be used easily into the new type of constructions also. So what we are doing is we are demonstrating all these technologies, understanding their scope of where you can use that, try to see videos, audios, or write-ups, whatever you need, we're trying to pick it up on that. Now comes the perspective of planning in this. Now when a material comes into a space, it doesn't come up without a planning element or a resource element. For example, this is one of the sites which is there in West Bengal. Try to see the resources which are there from which the houses is being made. And now try to project out that the kind of houses or the kind of development which we are projecting out, what kind of material and dependency are they. So I'm not saying that this kind of fusion is always possible, but there is a lot of possible thoughts which needs to be brought. Like for the third element, which is very important, I think is being covered now. It's more on the climate risk which we have and the cooling action. So there are various addendums which has been done, various strategies are being looked at. The syllabus is very clear. We have to work on something called cool roof. We have to work on water sensitive urban design. We have to look at cool materials, shading, combined strategies so that we can bring the temperature down. So even the bylaws has been amended. Under the bylaws, there is like a discussion which is coming on design features, adaptation, orientations, building envelopes, certification like it. So how this resilience path is going to look like. So see, geometry becomes one of the important elements. Heat for human activities becomes important. Heat retaining properties in terms of materials becomes important. Water, vegetation these becomes important. Right? So there is an adaptive as well as mitigative strategy which needs to be bunched together. Then that is how the IPCC is looking at the combinations from you. So combinations will be in terms of elements. cityscape compactness, tree cover, pervious, water bodies, air quality, building materials, road material. So you can't have something which is in isolation with it. So the subject, I think that's why you are getting now the doing twin degrees or dual degrees also, where you're trying to understand the both sides of the subject. Earlier, it used to be that you have a bachelor's in architecture, the master in planning, you get to understand the both sides of the world. Reason why? Because the problems are coming up from the applied sciences more than the basic sciences. So, for example, we do analysis on the CFD analytics, which is understanding the wind penetration and seeing that whether your layouts are correct or not. So how we look at the hyper-local action plans and air quality monitoring, looking at thermal comfort and ECBC, even trying to understand the remote sensing and GIS, how these combinations could be made and tailored to those requirements. This is something which is a fundamental requirement which you've been asked for. I'm not getting into details, but running the slides in front of you that these are the mitigation strategies, largely which resonate with the kind of idea which I've given to you. What you need to do is start placing them together so that at least a wonderful matrix like this would come out. So what is your city demands and needs? What are the actions which your city will take, and is there an ease of implementation or a benefit impact which could be assessed from it? If you have these kind of matrices already worked out and a direction clear to you, I think there will be some kind of response or a reasonable kind of response would be easily looked at. So even if you do not have a control, many people say that I do not have control on the new interventions which are coming. It's okay. Try to document what is already there with you. So what helped, what didn't help to you? These are some of the factors, and I think the protocols which we need to understand and document. And once these are there, we will definitely have a good prototype or a database coming with. And that's how I think the planning profession should lead us to in future. And with these expectations, I hand it back to Dr. Ravi.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank Rajneesh sir for sharing his valuable thoughts about various pertinent dimensions of spatial planning and climate change. Now, I would like to ask the participants about the questions, queries. Actually, I think one of the query was being asked by Mayank, respected Saswat sir. Despite of so many problems related to climate today and in future, why India is not working on climate action plan toolkit? And if working, then what are the problems that will come in making it? I think Professor Shashwat is not there. Rajneesh sir, can you please answer to this?
See, as I made it very clear to you that intention is very important. So currently, for example, I think we need to internalize this issue first. Acceptance is a big concern at this stage. So inequity, which is being created regionally, globally, in any case, has not been addressed very well. That's why we know many of the negotiation at COP fails many times, and we definitely see a lot of actions which remain unattended for a very long. That's the inequity which exists, you can say, nationally. And similarly, when it comes to the similar things within the city or in the regional scale, the inequity exists over there as well. So resilience becomes one of the important tools, getting onto efficient fixtures, fittings and all, and having a little more comfort within your house is easier for a person who has more economics background. And the person who is disadvantaged will have to bear with the brunt of it. So, for example, like even for space cooling, what we do is we displace the heat. Now, when we throw this heat, this goes where? This goes to the person who is as it is, or rather, he was the one who was living with nature. We disturbed his balance. Now, the government needs to be very clear when, like for example, when it comes to pollution, our policies are very clear that you cannot give your share of pollution to somebody else, right? So we have polluter pay principles, we have things like those, we have structures, we have law, we have enactments which are there in support of it. But unfortunately, at this stage, when we look at the heating or a cooling or an inequality which is there with regard to the subject, we are yet to begin our journey over there. And that's, I think I won't say that it's a loss always. It's an opportunity also, because effectively that's a space where the planning community or fraternity belongs. So this gives us open up as an opportunity, because it is the new subject or the new requirement which is shaping in front of us. try to see that how much maximum we can contribute to it and bring up something more meaningful. But yes, there is a lot of failures which are there in this path, and we need a kind of structure which is like even legal as well as other setups to be there. We have the schooling action plan to start with, but we need to add a little more teeth to it so that at least we can do justice to what is the requirements.
Thank you, sir. I would request rest of the participants as well to post your queries, if any, so that we can continue with the question answer session.
Dr. Chima, you are on mute.
I am just waiting for the queries, if any, sir.
Can we see? I think there was some comment in the chat box.
Not at the moment. Because
If not, then you can conclude also.
Okay, sir. Now I request Shri Jaswant Singh from Kumar Surjit Singh Institute of Spatial Planning and Environment Research, Panchkula, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Now we are coming to the formal close of this session. So first of all, I'd like to place on record our very sincere thanks on behalf of Center for Sustainable Habitat, GNDU, and KSS ISPAR, Panchkula, to Dr. Professor Saswat Bandyopadhyay, Professor SEPT University, Ahmedabad. He is a very close friend and very closely associated with all the ISPAR activities and programs for a very long time. So we keep on meeting on these kind of occasions, and his talks are always very penetrative and very insightful. So we place on record, since he's not there, so we place on record our thanks for Professor Saswat Bandyopadhyay. Mr. Sharendra Kaushik, co-founder Cities Form London, has given us, a kind of training workshop on how to prepare a sustainable mobility plan. So it was a very concise talk, Sharendra sir. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your joining us and giving a very elaborate plan for preparing a sustainable mobility plan. Dr. Shabnamjeet Singh Hundal, he calls himself Shab Hundal, from the JAM University of Applied Sciences, Finland. So he gave insight into the sustainable finance and how this subject is evolving day by day, and how corporates are taking a lot of interest in sustainable development. Yes, it's a right word he said, because in every aspect we see that, even maybe transport, green energy. So corporates do have a role. So the sustainable finance that way, is evolving, and he has given us real insights into this subject. Rajneesh Sareen Saab has from Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi, has talked about habitats and climate change, adaptation and resilience. He's a program director, and he's given us how Center for Science and Environment is helping the state governments, various agencies involved in urban planning and sustainable development with guidelines and policies. So thank you, Mr. Rajneesh Sareen. My thanks to Professor Luthra also for organizing this talk on Habitat Day, because he also had a very busy day. In the morning, we were engaged in another workshop webinar. So in the evening, we are holding this webinar. So thank you, Dr. Ashwini Luthra. Dr. Ravi Inder needs special mention because he has conducted this session, moderated this session very efficiently and very professionally. Thank you, Dr. Ravi Inder Chima. Lastly, we had about a participation of 65 to 70 persons. So thanks to all the participants who took time to register and then participate in this very important discussion. So lastly, thanks to the technical team of GNDU who have made this program possible. So with this, with the permission from Dr. Luthra, so I take this opportunity to close this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jaswant, for concluding the session. Thank you for sparing your valuable time because since morning you are busy in doing these webinar affairs. But special thanks to ISPER for giving us the opportunity to collaborate. And in future also, I would look into such endeavors so that not only online but face-to-face events are organized. Thank you, Dr. Jaswant. And I personally thank Dr. Chima for accepting my request to be the moderator for this webinar. And I thank my technical team for looking after the technology part of this webinar, because this webinar is being recorded and it will be put on the YouTube channel of the center. At the same time, live streaming on YouTube is going on. And in that regard, that my technical team, I would say, is very efficient in doing all these things. Thank you, Arvind and his team, Rupali, Kushpreet, Sandeep Chabda, and Harpreet and Thakurji. Thank you very much. And if Dr. Chima is to say something, Dr. Chima, you say, and then you may conclude, please. Thank you.
I just want to request once again to all the participants to fill the feedback form. The same will be emailed to you on your personal emails that you have registered. Thank you all for the patient listening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.